She was asked to leave the restaurant for breastfeeding, humiliated, shamed in front of strangers. But what happened next changed her entire life. Before we dive into this powerful story, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop in the comment below. I'd love to know. All right, let's begin. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon, a quiet lunch, nothing extraordinary. Inside a small family restaurant, the clinking of silverware and the gentle hum of conversation filled the air. The aroma of roasted chicken and warm bread drifted across the tables. Families laughed, friends shared stories, and couples leaned closer over steaming plates. At a corner table, away from most of the noise, sat Emily Carter, a young mother in her late 20s, with tired eyes but a soft, determined smile. Her infant son, Liam, rested peacefully in her arms, bundled in a blue blanket. Emily hadn't planned anything special that day. She just wanted a meal, a moment of normalcy, maybe even a break from the long nights of feedings and the constant weight of responsibility that came with being a single mom. Halfway through her meal, Liam began to stir. His little whimpers quickly grew into urgent cries, the kind only a mother recognizes instantly. Hunger. Emily looked around the restaurant. People were talking, eating, laughing, barely noticing her. She adjusted her scarf, shifted her chair slightly, and began to do the most natural thing in the world. She started nursing her son. For Emily, this wasn't an act of rebellion. It wasn't a statement. It was survival. It was love. It was a quiet bond between a mother and her child. But then, across the room, whispers began. A couple at a nearby table exchanged glances, one of them shaking their head. Another diner leaned toward a friend, muttering something under their breath. The warmth of the restaurant suddenly felt cold. And that's when it happened. A waiter, his name was Mark, approached Emily's table. His expression was strained, caught between discomfort and duty. He leaned in, lowering his voice but not enough to hide the tension. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you can't do that here. You'll need to take it outside." The words hit her like a slap. Emily froze, her heart pounding. For a moment, she thought she hadn't heard him right, but the stares from nearby tables confirmed it. Eyes lingered on her, heavy, judging, unkind. She swallowed hard, clutching Liam a little closer. Her cheeks flushed hot, but her voice stayed steady. I'm just feeding my baby." Mark shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if the walls themselves were watching. "Other customers are complaining," he said. "It's making people uncomfortable." The room went quiet. No one stood up for her. No one said a word. And in that silence, Emily felt small, exposed, humiliated. She had come for lunch, but what she got was shame. Emily gathered her things, trying to hold back the tears. With Liam still nursing, she began to rise from her chair, ready to leave. But what she didn't know was that someone was watching. And in just a few moments, everything, her day, her dignity, her future, was about to change. Emily froze, her breath catching in her chest as Mark's words echoed louder than the clattering plates around her. "Take it outside." The phrase replayed in her mind like a cruel refrain. She looked down at Liam, his tiny hand resting against her, his eyes still closed, unaware of the storm unraveling around them. She wanted to disappear, to shrink into the corner of the room where no one would see her. But there was no hiding. Every movement, every glance, every whisper now seemed directed at her. A woman at the next table shifted uncomfortably in her seat, crossing her arms. A man in a pressed shirt shook his head slowly, almost with disgust. Conversations that had once been lively had fallen flat, replaced by the heavy weight of unspoken judgment. Emily tried again, her voice quiet but trembling with conviction. "I'm only feeding my child." Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as if wishing the moment away. His tone hardened, though his eyes flickered with discomfort. "I understand, but customers are complaining. It's policy. You'll need to stop or step outside." Policy. The word stung, as though nourishing her son was somehow an offense against the rules. Emily's hands tightened around Liam. She felt the heat rise in her face, her heart pounding against her ribs like a drum. She could feel the tears pushing at the corners of her eyes, but she held them back. She would not cry, not here, not in front of them. Still, her voice quivered as she answered, "I have the right to feed my baby. I'm not doing anything wrong." For a brief moment, Mark hesitated. His jaw clenched, and his eyes darted to the side, scanning the room. The murmurs grew louder, a ripple of disapproval spreading among the diners. Someone coughed deliberately. Another let out an exaggerated sigh. Emily felt the weight of every stare pressing down on her shoulders. She wished, just once, that someone would speak up, that someone would stand beside her. But the silence was deafening. Mark finally shook his head. "Ma'am, please. You're making a scene." The words cut deeper than the coldest stare. She hadn't come here to make a scene. She hadn't come here to be noticed. All she wanted was a meal, a little peace, a little dignity. But now, standing at the center of a quiet storm, she felt stripped of all of it. Slowly, Emily reached for her bag, fumbled with the strap as Liam stirred against her. The clinking of the buckle seemed louder than ever. She tried to stand, her legs weak beneath her. Her scarf slipped slightly from her shoulder, and she pulled it back quickly, trying to shield herself from the prying eyes that refused to look away. A child across the room giggled, unaware of the tension. But for Emily, the moment felt endless, like every second stretched out into hours. The shame was suffocating. She had faced exhaustion, loneliness, even judgment before, but never had she felt so unwanted. She turned toward the door, ready to leave, each step heavier than the last. And though she tried to keep her head high, she couldn't shake the thought. Maybe this was how the world would always see her. As a burden, as an inconvenience, as someone who didn't belong. But just as her hand brushed the strap of her diaper bag, a voice rose behind her, calm, steady, and filled with something she hadn't felt all day. Compassion. "Excuse me," it said. And in that single moment, everything began to shift. Emily's fingers trembled as she adjusted Liam's blanket, her heart heavy with humiliation. She had almost reached for her bag when the sound of footsteps broke through the silence. Slow, purposeful, different from a hurried shuffle of waiters carrying trays or the nervous taps of impatient diners. A tall man approached from the far side of the restaurant. His presence carried a quiet authority, not loud or commanding, but steady, like someone who had weathered storms before. His name was Anthony Reynolds, owner of the restaurant, a man whose reputation in the neighborhood wasn't just for food, but for fairness. He had been watching. From the corner of the dining room, Anthony had seen it all. The whispers, the stares, Mark's uneasy attempt to handle the situation. And now, Emily's shame as she prepared to leave. As he drew closer, the chatter of the restaurant fell away. Chairs squeaked. Forks paused midway in mouths. Every eye shifted to him. Anthony stopped just a step away from Emily's table. His voice, calm but resolute, carried across the silence. "That won't be necessary." Emily froze, looking up at him, unsure what he meant. He turned to Mark, the waiter still standing rigid beside the table. "She's not leaving," Anthony said, his tone firm but without anger. "She's a mother feeding her child, and she's welcome here." A murmur rippled across the room. Some faces flushed with embarrassment. Others turned away, pretending not to listen. Mark swallowed hard, his discomfort plain, but he nodded quietly and stepped back. Emily's chest tightened. Relief and disbelief swirled together. For the first time that afternoon, she didn't feel completely alone. Anthony bent slightly, so his voice carried only to her. "Would you come with me? I think you and Liam deserve a little more privacy. Somewhere comfortable." Emily hesitated, clutching her son protectively. After the humiliation she had just endured, trust didn't come easily, but there was something in Anthony's eyes, kindness, understanding, maybe even a trace of memory, that eased her fears. Slowly, she nodded. He guided her gently toward the back of the restaurant, past the curious stares, past the half-whispered comments. With every step, Emily felt the heaviness of shame begin to lift. Not all of it, but enough to breathe again. They reached a narrow staircase. Anthony led her up to the second floor, away from the clatter and chatter, to a quiet hallway that smelled faintly of polished wood. He opened a door at the end and motioned her inside. "This is my office," he said softly. "It's private. Take all the time you need." The room was warm and inviting, with a worn leather chair by the window and shelves lined with old cookbooks and framed photographs of family gatherings. It wasn't grand, but it was safe. Safe in a way the dining room downstairs had never been. Emily lowered herself into the chair, cradling Liam as he fed in peace. Her eyes stung again, but this time the tears were different. Not shame, not humiliation. Something gentler, something like gratitude. Anthony paused at the doorway, watching quietly for a moment before speaking. "No one should ever make you feel unwelcome for caring for your child," he said. "Not in my restaurant. Not anywhere." Emily couldn't find the words. She simply nodded, her throat too tight to speak. For the first time that day, she felt seen, respected, human, and though she didn't know it yet, this quiet act of kindness, this simple decision by one man, was only the beginning of a change that would alter the course of her life. Emily sat in the quiet of Anthony's office, the door now closed behind her. The world outside, those stairs, those whispers, felt like another planet. Here, there was only the soft creak of the old leather chair and the steady rhythm of Liam's breathing as he nursed contentedly in her arms. For the first time all day, she exhaled fully, and with that breath came the release she had been holding back, the tears she had fought so hard to hide. They slipped down her cheeks silently, hot against her tired skin. It wasn't just the incident downstairs. It was everything. The long nights when she rocked Liam until dawn, praying he'd sleep just one more hour. The mornings when she left the apartment with messy hair, unwashed clothes, and a forced smile, determined to look stronger than she felt. The endless balancing act between bills, groceries, diapers, and the constant weight of being enough. For him, for herself, for a world that always seemed to be watching. She thought about the people at those tables. The way they stared, not with empathy, but with judgment. It wasn't the first time. Grocery stores, bus rides, even parks. Always someone with a raised eyebrow, a sideways glance, a muttered comment about how she should cover up, or wait, or simply do it somewhere else. But how could they not understand? Feeding her son wasn't optional. It wasn't something to be scheduled neatly into the quiet corners of life. Hunger came when it came. And yet, every time, she was the one made to feel ashamed. Her mind drifted back further, to the night Liam was born. She remembered the exhaustion, the fear, and then the overwhelming flood of love when she held him for the first time. She had promised herself in that moment that she would protect him no matter what, that she would fight for him, even if the world didn't understand. But here she was, shaken, wondering if she was strong enough to keep that promise. Emily brushed her fingers over Liam's soft cheek. His tiny mouth moved rhythmically as he fed, completely unaware of the storm that had just passed. He didn't care about judgment or policies or uncomfortable stares. All he knew was safety, nourishment, love. And in that realization, something shifted. Yes, she was exhausted. Yes, she was humiliated. But she was also unbreakable in ways she hadn't fully understood before. She had endured the long nights, the empty bank account, the loneliness, and she was still here. She was still fighting. The tears slowed, her breathing steadied. She wiped her face with the edge of her sleeve, almost embarrassed by her own breakdown, though no one had seen it. And as she looked down at Liam, her voice was barely more than a whisper. "It's you and me, kid. Just you and me, and we're going to be okay." In that moment, the shame she had carried began to unravel. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to remind her of who she was. A mother, a protector, a woman who, no matter how many times the world tried to push her aside, would keep standing for her son. And she didn't know it yet, but outside that office, the man who had given her this small refuge was about to play a far bigger role in her story than she ever imagined. The room was still. Emily sat cradling Liam, lost in her thoughts, when the sound of a gentle knock came at the door. It opened slowly, and Anthony stepped inside, careful not to startle her. He closed it behind him, giving her the privacy she deserved. For a moment, He didn't say anything. He simply watched, a mother and child in the quiet act of love that had been so cruelly interrupted downstairs. His face softened. Emily glanced up, brushing at her eyes quickly, embarrassed that he might have noticed her tears. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Anthony shook his head, pulling a chair closer so he could sit across from her. "You didn't cause trouble," he replied gently. "You were feeding your son. That's not trouble. That's life." Her eyes welled again, not from shame this time, but from the rare kindness in his tone. So few people spoke to her like that anymore. I get so tired of it," Emily admitted. "Everywhere I go, it feels like someone has something to say, like I'm doing something wrong." She paused, her voice cracking. "I'm just trying to be a good mom." Anthony leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. His voice was steady, calm, carrying the weight of someone who had lived long enough to know struggle. "You are a good mom. Anyone who looks at you can see it. But people, they forget. They forget what it's like to be vulnerable, to be responsible for someone so small, someone who depends on you for everything." Emily let his words sink in. She wanted to believe them, needed to believe them. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," she confessed. "It's just me. Liam's father isn't around, and it's been so hard to juggle everything. Work, bills, taking care of him. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." The honesty in her voice struck something deep in Anthony. He thought of his own life. His wife years ago, nursing their firstborn in the same exhausted, determined way. He remembered the sacrifices, the nights when money was tight, the times when kindness from a stranger made all the difference. "Emily," he said slowly, "I can't pretend to know all of your struggles, but I do know this. You don't have to do it all alone. Not here. Not anymore." She looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Anthony hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I need someone like you here. Someone who understands people. Someone who has strength, even when she doesn't feel it herself. I can offer you a job, flexible hours, steady pay. You'd have the space to care for Liam without feeling like you're in the way." Emily blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. A job? From the man whose restaurant she had almost been thrown out of minutes earlier? I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Anthony replied with a small, encouraging smile. "Because you deserve better than what this world has given you so far. And because I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself yet." The room was silent again, but this silence was different. Not heavy with shame or judgment, but filled with possibility. Emily looked down at Liam, his tiny face peaceful in her arms. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't weighed down by constant fear. A future with stability, with dignity, with hope. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Okay, yes, I'll take it." And in that moment, the course of her life shifted. What had begun as a day of humiliation was transforming into something she never expected. A chance. A chance not just to survive, but to rebuild. The weeks that followed unfolded like a story Emily never imagined she would be part of. What began with a single act of kindness slowly grew into something larger, a new chapter of her life. Emily showed up at the restaurant on her very first day with Liam strapped against her chest in a baby carrier. Her steps were unsure, her palms sweaty, but Anthony was waiting at the door with a reassuring nod. "You'll do fine," he told her. "Just be yourself." And so she began. At first, she worked as a hostess, greeting customers with a shy smile. But soon, the shyness faded. People noticed the warmth in her voice, the patience in her manner. She wasn't just handing out menus. She was welcoming people into a space that had once made her feel so unwelcome. There were moments of doubt, of course. Nights when Liam cried endlessly, mornings when exhaustion clung to her like a shadow. But this time, she wasn't carrying it all alone. Anthony made sure she had flexible hours. Coworkers pitched in when she needed a break, and little by little, Emily started to breathe easier. She began to laugh again, real laughter, not the forced kind she had practiced to hide her struggles. She even started making friends among the staff. Maria, one of the waitresses, often whispered encouragement when Emily felt overwhelmed. Jorge, the cook, snuck her extra meals when he noticed she hadn't eaten. The restaurant slowly became more than a workplace. It became a family. Customers noticed too. They remember her face, her kindness. They'd ask for her when they came back, and some even slipped kind words her way. Words she hadn't heard in so long. "You have such a gift with people," one regular said. Another added, "You always make this place feel brighter." Each compliment stitched a little more confidence into the fabric of who she was becoming. And Liam, he grew, too, healthy, happy, and always nearby. On quiet afternoons, when the lunch rush faded, Anthony let Emily keep him in the office upstairs. Sometimes she'd peek in and find him asleep in a bassinet by the desk, sunlight pouring through the window onto his tiny face. For the first time, Emily felt she could work and mother without choosing one over the other. The transformation wasn't overnight. It came in small, steady steps, in paychecks that actually covered rent, in nights where she finally slept a few hours without fear, in the way she carried herself when she walked through the restaurant doors, not as a woman who'd been shamed for breastfeeding, but as someone who belonged. Her world, once so fragile, was growing stronger. Brick by brick, kindness by kindness, Emily was building a life she thought she'd lost. And perhaps the most unexpected part was how her story changed the restaurant itself. What had once been just another place to eat became a symbol of something more, a safe haven, a place of compassion. People began to notice not just the food, but the atmosphere. It felt different, warmer because of her presence. Emily didn't just find a job. She found her footing. She found dignity. She found hope again. And though she couldn't see the full picture yet, she was becoming the very heartbeat of the restaurant, a reminder to everyone who walked through the door that sometimes the hardest trials give birth to the most beautiful transformations. Word of what had happened inside Anthony's restaurant did not stay within its walls. Stories like Emily's have a way of traveling, quietly at first, then louder until they can't be ignored. It began with whispers among regular customers, people who had seen the confrontation, who had watched Anthony step in and offer his office to a young mother in tears. They told their friends, who told theirs. Soon, the story found its way onto social media. A single post, a simple sentence. A mom was asked to leave for breastfeeding, but the owner gave her his office and then a job. The post spread quickly. Comments poured in. Mothers shared their own experiences, times they had been shamed in public, times they had hidden in cars or bathrooms, times they had felt invisible. The flood of voices was overwhelming, but also unifying. Emily wasn't alone. She never had been. And as her story gained attention, the restaurant began to change in ways no one expected. On any given afternoon, it wasn't unusual to see another mother nursing at a table without fear. Where once there had been stares, now there were smiles, nods of encouragement, even quiet words of solidarity. Anthony himself made sure every staff member understood. No mother would ever be asked to leave his restaurant again. He even added a small sign near the entrance. Simple but powerful. This is a breastfeeding-friendly space. All mothers and children are welcome here. What had started as one man's act of compassion became a movement inside those walls. Other businesses nearby took notice. A bookstore down the street added cozy chairs for nursing mothers. A cafe offered free tea to parents who needed a moment of rest. The ripple was spreading. And Emily, she began to see herself differently too. The woman who once walked out of places with her head down was now walking in with her chin high. Other mothers came up to her, sometimes with tears in their eyes, thanking her for being brave, even if she hadn't felt brave at the time. One woman told her, "Because of you, I fed my baby at the park today without hiding." Another whispered, "I thought I was the only one, but your story gave me courage." Each word lit a spark inside Emily. The shame that had once chained her was slowly being replaced with pride. Pride not just for surviving, but for showing others that they could, too. The restaurant, once just a place to grab a meal, had become a symbol of compassion, a safe haven. A reminder that sometimes the smallest acts, a chair offered, an office opened, a kind word spoken, can echo far beyond the moment itself. Emily never set out to inspire anyone. She had only wanted to feed her son. But in doing so, she had sparked a change larger than herself. And though the world was far from perfect, she could feel it shifting little by little, one story at a time, one act of kindness at a time. The ripple effect had begun. Time passed, and the restaurant that had once been a place of humiliation became the very place where Emily found her strength. Sitting by the office window one afternoon, she watched Liam, now a little older, toddling clumsily across the floor with his curious hands reaching for everything in sight. His laughter filled the room, echoing against the walls that had once held her tears. Emily smiled, a smile that came from deep inside, from a place she once thought was lost. She thought about that first day, the whispers, the stares, the shame that had threatened to break her. And then she thought about the moment Anthony stepped in, a stranger who chose compassion over silence, a man who saw her not as a problem, but as a person. It still amazed her how quickly life could change, how one act of kindness could alter the course of everything. She whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, if he hadn't spoken up that day, where would I be now? The truth was, she might have walked out of that restaurant broken, carrying only humiliation and doubt. But instead, she walked out with dignity restored, and later, she walked back in with hope. The lesson wasn't lost on her, and it shouldn't be lost on any of us. Because this story isn't just about one mother or one restaurant. It's about all of us. It's about the power of compassion in the small moments, about choosing to stand up when it would be easier to stay silent, about recognizing that behind every tired smile, behind every whispered apology, behind every mother clutching her child, there is a story, a struggle, a strength. Emily's journey reminds us that kindness doesn't have to be grand to be life-changing. Sometimes it's as simple as a chair offered, a door open, a word spoken when no one else dares to speak. And maybe that's what the world needs more of, not perfection, not policy, but humanity. Emily now walks into the restaurant not as a customer shamed into leaving, but as someone who belongs, as a woman who turned pain into purpose, as a mother who will one day tell her son about the moment everything changed, how the world tried to push her aside, but one act of compassion lifted her back up. And for everyone listening, the message is clear. You never know the weight someone is carrying. You never know the battles they've already fought just to stand where they are. But you do have the power to make that weight a little lighter, that battle a little easier, simply by choosing kindness. In the end, Emily's story isn't just her own. It's a reminder to all of us that what we do for others, no matter how small it may seem, can ripple farther than we will ever know. And sometimes the difference between despair and hope, between shame and dignity, between breaking down and standing tall, can come down to a single moment, a single choice, one act of compassion. That's all it takes. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. This is Heartfelt Tales TV, where every story reminds us of the power of kindness, courage, and humanity. Until next time, take care and keep spreading compassion.